Outsourcing is celebrated in India, at least in the IT industry. But did you know India is outsourcing you and citizens like you, your body and your life, to foreign pharma companies who use sick and ailing Indians as human guinea pigs? NewsX's special investigation, A Scam of Lives, reveals a sickening reality of how poor and innocent Indians, too naive to understand what's happening to them, are taken advantage of. And the government, instead of trying to protect them, allow foreign pharma companies to experiment their drugs on them in a process called clinical trials. Incredibly, the government of India is trying to turn India into a cheap clinical trial destination. It's trying to attract foreign pharma companies who don't want to and cannot afford to test their drugs on their own people. And instead, they'll come to India and do all the dirty work here. Watch.
हॉस्पिटल के नाम से मेरे को डर लगने लगे उसमें, वरना कभी मैं मर भी जाऊंगा, मरते टाइम पे भी उस हॉस्पिटल में नहीं जाऊंगा मैं।
पढ़े लिखे नहीं है, जहाँ साइन करवाया वहाँ करवा दिया, जो लिख दिया वो लिख दिया। अनपढ़ों के साथ तो कितने अत्याचार कर रहे हैं वो बताइए।
This is the story of how thousands like Lakshmi, Ramadhar and Sheikh Bibi are being sold like guinea pigs to foreign companies who make billions of their lives, by fellow Indians who shamelessly trade in the lives of their most vulnerable brothers and sisters.
These little pills are big money. We love them and need them because they save lives. But do you know how many lives it costs to make one such pill? Indian lives, often of the poorest of the poor.
The technical term is clinical trials, but it's just a fancy term for using human beings like lab rats. Before a drug is released to the public, it has to be tested. The first victims are these little mice. Then the next step is to test on monkeys and dogs, preferably beagles. But it is the final stage that is the most dangerous and cruel, when experimental drugs are tested on actual human beings. With the protests against testing and the costs of doing it in the West rising, pharma companies are now increasingly coming to India to do their dirty work.
Here they get low cost, cheaper trials, they don't pay anything to the patients and the subjects also. And then what they've done for the marketing approval, they do to go back to their own country.
Indian laws and the government actually virtually stand aside, allowing them a free hand in this exploitation.
We are a soft state. It's getting a bad name because we don't have our own protocols and regulations in place and we are not enforcing them.
60-year-old Ramadhar Srivastava is a former engineer. A local agent enrolled him at a clinical trial being conducted by British company AstraZeneca without even telling him. When he had a heart attack in 2007, he went to the Bhopal Memorial Hospital. A doctor he didn't know gave him 2 bottles of unlabeled pills, asked him to sign a form in English that he couldn't read. For 2 years, the doctor insisted Srivastava took the pills. He never told him they were for a clinical trial on an experimental drug. He never gave him any money.
मैं इंग्लिश जानता नहीं हिंदी में मैंने कोई साइन नहीं ना इन्होंने बताया कि मैं आपसे ट्रायल कर रहा हूँ, क्या कर रहा हूँ, क्या नहीं कर रहा है, मेरे को कुछ भी नहीं बताया मेरे को.
Since 2005, foreign pharma companies have made a beeline for India, where a clinical trial costs just $1,500 per person, less than 1/10 of the cost in the United States. Thousands of lives are estimated to have been devastated by the strange side effects of these experimental drugs. And officially, 1,954 Indians have died in clinical trials between 2009 to 2012.
Should the government of India be encouraging this debasement of its citizens, or should it be acting to stop it?
Now, NewsX's special investigation is the first time an Indian channel brings you the full story of clinical trials in India and asks why Indians are being exploited with the connivance of the very people meant to protect them: doctors, medical companies, hospitals, and the government.
Perhaps Prime Minister Manmohan Singh saw it just as an economic reform. In 2005, the UPA government passed laws that enabled foreign pharma companies to conduct clinical trials phase 2 and phase 3 in India. This was not to aid Indian healthcare or the Indian pharma industry. It just made it easier for foreign pharma companies to conduct clinical trials in India as opposed to their own countries. Since no one would want to become a human guinea pig willingly and knowingly, the clinical trials relied on the ignorance of the people and weak laws, all to entrap poor Indians for the benefit of foreign companies whose drugs ordinary Indians would never be able to afford anyway.
Cost is one reason that foreign pharma companies want to conduct clinical trials in India. A much bigger reason is ignorance. With millions of poor and ignorant people, foreign companies know and cynically use the fact that most Indians don't even know what they're getting into when they are seduced into becoming a lab rat.
These villages turned into a hotspot of unethical clinical trials, and the poverty-stricken women of Adarsh and Lenin Nagar of Pidigaralu town were used as guinea pigs, and none of the victims were aware of the possible adverse effects of the drug while giving their consent.
This is Chorus Kannamma. She's bedridden. Her 30-year-old daughter, Jaka Kumari, works in line clinics in Adarsh Nagar, a slum in Guntur, Andhra Pradesh, earning about 100 rupees a day. They agreed to be part of clinical trial just because an agent promised them 10,000 rupees. The woman was a local agent with Access Clinicals, which outsourced poor Indians for clinical trials being conducted by the US pharma company Quintals.
వాళ్ళు వేసిన టాబ్లెట్ మనలో ఎంతవాటికి పనిచేస్తుంది అనేది తెలుసుకోవటానికే మనకేం కాదు అది మేము వెళ్ళొచ్చాము పోదాం రాండి అని అంటే వెళ్ళాం మేడం మేము.
Uneducated and desperate, they signed up without knowing what they were letting themselves in for.
వాళ్ళంతా జిల్లా టాబ్లెట్లు తినొచ్చినాక ఇవన్నీ నొప్పులు కాళ్ళు నొప్పులు వాళ్ళంతా జిల్లా పనికి బాగాలేకుండా పిల్లలే బట్టీలు పోయి బతికెత్తుంది నన్ను.
Sadly, Indian pharma companies have joined the fray. More than 400 women were enrolled without their knowledge or consent into a clinical trial for a drug named letrozole made by local company Sun Pharma. Although the company and the doctors who carried out the test broke the law, no one has been put under criminal investigation by the Indian authorities.
You have so many cases of people not being told what's happening. They're just subjected to trial because in India the concept of informed consent just doesn't exist.
On 11th of August this year, Pfizer started handing over 84 lakhs to each of its victims of Trovan trial on children in Kano, Nigeria. In Germany, Sanofi Aventis paid more than 40 lakhs to a family of a woman who died during a trial of an antidepressant agent, Nemofencine. In United States, 18 crores was paid to poor women with high-risk pregnancies, but in India, compensation paid by pharma companies is quite meager. Sheikh Bibi is a daily worker at a white cement factory in Pidugurola town, Guntur. With her husband unwell and her daughter divorced, the family was in a need of money, so she decided to participate in a clinical trial.
उन्होंने 8,000 देते हैं को बोल के ले जाको 1,000 रुपए दिए हमारे को हमको जान असल अच्छा नहीं है अब उन्होंने हमें को 1,000 रुपए 100 रुपए रहे तो भी हमारे जान खराब से रहने का वहाँ गए करने से जान अच्छा रहना नहीं है.
Once the trials began, she started losing her health and soon lost her vision in her left eye. And instead of making extra money, she is now dealing with medical bills.
वहाँ गए सखाने से हंकी पूरा गया पानी टपकता है हंकी अच्छा नहीं है मेरे को.
There are many more like Sheikh Bibi and Kannamma, unknown and unaccounted for, who are falling sick and dying. But the Drug Controller General of India has no data as it has not been maintaining composite data. According to an RTI and on basis of the compensation paid by pharma companies, in 2011, 430 people died due to clinical trials. But compensation was paid only to 16 volunteers because pharma companies found only 16 had died due to clinical trials. In 2010, 668 cases of deaths were reported, of which compensation was paid only to 22 families.
It's become a bizarre bazaar, if I may put it that way. No, and I really cannot feel very apologetic about the fact that the government is not doing enough.
The most compensation ever given is a measly 5 lakh rupees, paid up by Pfizer when a patient lost his life while participating in a study of a rheumatoid arthritis drug. Shamelessly, Germany's Fresenius Kabi paid only 50,000 rupees each to the families of 2 patients who had died during clinical trials of its cancer drug.
Stay with us. When we come back, we will reveal how poor and innocent Indians are being taken for a ride by those people who they trust and are meant to protect them. With rampant and uncontrolled clinical trials taking place in India, it's easy for us to blame the foreign companies. But the truth of the matter is that Indians are just as complicit, as they act as procurers trying to source and lure poor and illiterate Indians into turning into lab rats.
It's a hard fact of history that when Indians are exploited by foreigners, other Indians usually act as the middlemen between the exploiters and the exploited. History is now repeating itself with dire, almost inhuman cruelty. This is Dhanalakshmi, and this is the company that she says ruined her life. Axis is what is technically called a CRO, a clinical research organization. That's a polite term for the people who procure poor Indians to act as human guinea pigs in clinical trials.
అందుకని బాబుకి ఆపరేషన్ చేద్దామని యాక్సిస్ ల్యాబ్కి వెళ్ళాము. వెళ్ళొచ్చిన నెల 15 రోజులకే ఇంకా ఒంట్లో బాగోలేకపోవడం జరుగుతుంది. రోజుకో ఒక రోగం చొప్పున కళ్ళు తిరగటమనో తల తిరగటమనో గుండెల్లో నొప్పున కాళ్ళు లాకరాటమనో.
Others in this tiny hamlet called Adarsh Nagar near Guntur in Andhra Pradesh had the same sad story to tell. It was only when this man heard about the people suffering in his village that the government acted.
उन सब्जन जान अच्छे नहीं उसे सब्जन को बुला जाको गुंटूर कलेक्टर ऑफिस के बाजू को टेंट रखो धरना करे 1 महीने करे करने के बाद कलेक्टर आको उन सब्जन को वो जरा वो मदद करने के MRO को सब्जन दिया.
Hassan's action revealed the full magnitude of the tragedy. 35 women in and around Guntur had been fooled into becoming lab rats. The Drugs Controller General of India, which licenses clinical trials in India, initiated an investigation and cancelled Axis's approval for conducting clinical trials.
But there are thousands of Axis across India, luring the poor and innocent every day into joining clinical trials. Shockingly, there is no official oversight of their work, no regulation of their activities. Now, when NewsX asked the Drugs Controller of India for a list of licensed CROs in the country, they said they have no such list, which means the government doesn't even know which companies are procuring people for clinical trials, much less regulating them. CROs are quite simply a law unto themselves.
The consequence of the government's virtual abdication of responsibility is best seen in Bhopal, where one tragedy is being built on the back of another. After Bhopal's catastrophic gas disaster, around 20,000 people had died and up to 800,000 were afflicted, many with terrible and incurable disease. This is the hospital, the Bhopal Memorial Hospital and Research Centre. Union Carbide built to help the victims of its gas tragedy, but today it is manufacturing new victims by becoming one of India's largest centres for clinical trials. Reports reveal more than 215 Bhopal gas tragedy survivors were lured into participating in more than 6 clinical trials the Bhopal Memorial Hospital carried out for Theravance, Sanofi and Wyeth. The hospital made more than 10 million rupees from these British, US and French drug companies, and their treatments have since been approved for use in Europe and the United States. But 13 Indians died during the testing of these drugs and no one cared. No autopsies were performed, no investigations, and worse, no compensation paid.
If someone really wants to do an independent and impartial investigation, it is still possible through verbal autopsy, by recording what kind of problems the person had and then sending it to a panel of independent physicians to actually look into it and reconstruct the way the person would have suffered and died.
Of the 13 people who died here at the Bhopal Memorial Hospital, 12 were gas tragedy patients. However, no autopsies were conducted on any of them, making it virtually impossible to determine if their deaths had anything to do with them being on drug trials. The cause of death listed was due to heart disease. A majority of these patients were undergoing treatment for heart disease and were administered a drug called ticagrelor, a medicine for heart patients.
You have to have an ethical review committee. So I'll choose you, this, and they're all my people. Anything goes wrong, nothing is disclosed. Something is slightly doubtful, all right. These people give clean chits. And you get into the market, there's nothing to protect the person who was actually subjected to human trials. Those protocols exist, but they're not enforceable at law.
The government's response has been shamefully meek. Quintiles, one of the world's largest CROs based in North Carolina, USA, was merely sent a polite warning letter from the DCGI after it was found to conduct clinical trials on Bhopal gas victims. Not just Quintiles, another US-based pharma company, AstraZeneca, used Bhopal gas victims to carry out trials for ticagrelor, a medicine for heart attacks and strokes.
Because there's no law, you cannot arrest anyone for soliciting a patient. You can only, delicense a trial if it is authorized and if it is being done with the permission of the Drug Controller Authority. All you can do is to say that the trial should be stopped. There's not even any punitive penalty on any unethical work in the process of the trial.
Let's listen again to Ms. Rao.
Because there's no law, because there's no law, because there's no law.
Indian laws allow for commercial ethics committees to be hired by the very CROs they're expected to monitor. The CROs, for their part, appear to be acting as pimps for the pharma companies. It is this deficiency of standards that has blotted the Indian drug industry and severely set back the CRO industry.
The benefits of chemical trials are many, but there are several malpractices in the trade as well. We were shocked to learn how Indian doctors are sometimes accomplices in the trade, misleading poor and innocent Indians into turning into human subjects, all for a little money.
This is Indore's Maharaja Yashwantrao Hospital. Its records show that more than 80 patients were enrolled into clinical trials being conducted on behalf of the British Heart Foundation, AstraZeneca, Biogel and Mundi Pharma. 32 of these people died, some of them from natural causes.
There is a nexus between the companies and the medical doctors conducting the trials.
Often, there is no autopsy conducted on those who died during clinical trials. Since there is no proof of how or why they died, there is no compensation for the families. And the doctors who conduct these trials go unchallenged.
We found in so many cases that they are doing on the rickshaw pullers, the laborers, and the consent form was in English. So that shows that there's hidden malicious agenda of the pharma company as well as the doctors.
According to the 59th Department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee report on the functioning of the Central Drugs and Control Organization, there is sufficient evidence on record to conclude that there is collusive nexus between drug manufacturers, some functionaries of the Central Drugs and Control Organization, and some medical experts.
But the big money behind clinical trials is keeping the industry ahead of regulators, and new rules that allow what are known as phase 3 clinical trials are creating new havoc in the country. India changed its IPR law in 2005 and allowed Phase 2 and Phase 3 trials on human beings for safety and efficacy of potential drugs. The trials are monitored and then data is collected, consolidated and signed off by doctors. And it's only after Phase 3 approvals that a company is able to sell these drugs. There are documented cases where the doctors in cahoots with the pharma companies are giving their okay and approving the trial drugs without actually studying the reports.
According to the 59th Parliamentary Committee report, a review of the opinions submitted by the expert on various drugs shows that an overwhelming majority are recommendations based on personal perception without giving any hard scientific evidence or data. Such opinions are of extremely limited value and merely a formality. Still worse, there is an adequate documentary evidence to come to the conclusion that many opinions were actually written by the invisible hands of drug manufacturers and experts merely obliged by putting their signatures. Take the case of Clevidine. 3 experts, Dr. Randeep Guleria of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, Dr. Satish Lahoti of KBN Medical College, Karnataka, and Dr. Apurv Mukherjee of RG Kar Medical College, Kolkata, located at different places thousands of miles apart from each other, sent word-to-word identical letters of recommendation. In addition, all of them went out of their way to give unsolicited advice in identical language to DCGI to give permission to the company to market the drug without conducting mandatory clinical trials in India. In this case, in a letter number 12298/06 dated 12/2/2007, an official of the Government of India advised the manufacturer, Themis Medicare Limited, not only to select experts but to get their opinions and deliver them to the office of DCGI. No wonder that many experts gave letters of recommendations in identical language, apparently drafted by the interested drug manufacturer.
They are so lenient for pharma companies, they have allowed them to make the rules. Naturally, they will make the rules in their favor, not the favor of people of India.
5 years later, no action has been taken against the doctors nor against the official of the Central Drug Standard Control Organization.
There's supposed to be ethical committees that are supposed to look whether it's done ethically, but many of the ethical committees are being outsourced, and someone is sitting in Gujarat and theoretically supposed to be supervising and looking at something taking place in a totally different state. And many of them have, links with the pharma companies.
Lakshmi and her late husband Shankar Lal was a victim of the infamous Bhopal gas tragedy. When he fell ill in 2008 and went to the Bhopal Memorial Hospital, he was enrolled in a clinical trial. Lakshmi says they were given no information, just a lot of little pills. These pills were Tricagalo, a drug used to control heart attacks and strokes that was being tested for approval. AstraZeneca is the pharma company that makes these medicines. And while there is no evidence to link Shankarlal's death with the medicines, Shankar's cause of death is listed as heart attack. And in the papers Lakshmi was given after her husband died, it clearly mentions that Shankarlal was given a study drug, and Lakshmi and her husband had no idea they were being tested for drugs.
डॉक्टर ने विश्वासघात करा हमारे ऊपर, क्या क्यों करा इनने? कम से कम इतना तो जान लेते कि इनके घर में कोई है नहीं है कमाने वाला.
It is no wonder when NewsX tried to speak to the health minister, he refused.
पूछा था एंटीबायोटिक्स और सवाल पूछ रहा था क्लिक करता. 1-2 दिन के बाद you can come to me.
So what then is the best way to test new drugs, to make the industry more responsible and to ensure patient safety?
The government needs to answer some questions to the people of India, and NewsX is asking what sort of corruption is happening in clinical trials.
Clinical trials are done all over the world and are required. But why is India becoming an attractive destination for clinical trials?
Why is there so much of secrecy about these trials? Why no one talks about it? Why is there no data available on these trials? And why is it that the companies do not allow to shoot their labs? Why the secrecy?
The contract research organizations who are being outsourced these clinical trials are killing Indians in the name of tests. Why is this happening?
There are doctors and pharmaceutical companies who are working together, a nexus that is killing people instead of healing them. Now, why are these doctors agreeing to these tests? What do they stand to gain?
Why it is only when the Supreme Court stepped in that the government of India declared the number of people who have died during the drug trials in India?
Why is the Indian government not holding to account any of the companies like Theravance, Sanofi and Vet, or even CROs like Quintiles involved in tests conducted on poor, unsuspecting people of Bhopal?
A large number of trials are not being registered. So even though we have an apex body to look at it, if the apex body is not aware which trials are going on and where.
Isn't it ironical that some of these drugs being tested are so costly that even those on whom these drugs are being tested cannot even dream of purchasing these drugs?
Are the drugs being tested? Are they being tested for Indians' use?
What are the things for which you're going to allow clinical trials? If you got safe, effective, affordable drugs and someone wants to come up with something which you really don't need, no. And it's not even going to be for your people.
According to the parliamentary report, the committee is of the firm opinion that most of the ills besetting the system of drugs regulation in India are mainly due to the skewed priorities and perceptions of CDSCO. And unless the government of India does not formulate new laws, monitor the clinical trial and hold the pharma company and doctors accountable, the people of India will continue to lose their health and their life.
With so many scams coming on and simple people are behind these scams, we are pretty sure that we will be able to work out. Even Parliamentary Standing Committee has pledged that he will take this case and they will formulate something, proper laws which will definitely help the citizens of India.
The Parliamentary Committee report has clearly stated that all is not right with the system of drug regulation in India, mainly because of their skewed priorities and perceptions. And if the government does not set its house in order, innocent Indians will continue to be sacrificed. Thanks for watching Special Investigation on Clinical Trials in India. Keep watching NewsX.